Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soft Power Project. Today, I wanted to talk about toxic relationships, but maybe not in a way that you think. I wanted to talk about someone that plays a really big role in a toxic relationship, not exactly the person who's doing all the harm on you, the narcissist or just the toxic people, but actually the enablers. Because without enablers, toxic people, they cannot survive. And enablers really need this sort of behavior as well. So they create the system. It's an ecosystem. So when you're leaving a toxic relationship, you're not just leaving this one person, you're leaving the ecosystem. And what does that mean? It could be incredibly lonely, right? Because these enablers, they can be your siblings, they can be people that are very dear to your heart. They could be your best friends. They are empaths. They are compassionate people. They're kind people. They're probably people pleasers. And in order to leave that relationship, you have to actually leave these enablers behind in order to gain true clarity. And I know it's really hard because I've been there. And I remember the first time I experienced enablers was at a job that I had in my late 20s. I just came back from the States to Taiwan. I started teaching at cram school. I was a teacher slash coordinator at the time. And the boss at that cram school, she was really young, very successful, but she was mean. She belittled people, she yelled at people, and I could not understand why people would tolerate that. I certainly couldn't. So I kept a distance from her. And one time I actually asked one of the young girls who worked at the cram school, I asked her, didn't that bother you? The way she yelled at you? And the young girl actually said to me, well, she's just being who she is. That's just who she is. She's very authentic. And I was so incredibly confused. In my head, I'm like, well, it doesn't make any sense. Being rude doesn't mean you're being authentic. It doesn't mean it's okay. Like just because you reframed it as being authentic, that doesn't make it okay. But I think I was really lucky at the time because I wasn't heavily invested in that company, in that job. I left really quickly and I get to distance myself. But, after that experience, I encountered many enablers in, personal relationship, romantic relationship, work relationships. It really doesn't matter how old you are. They are enablers in the system. So I wanted to talk about my experience and my understanding of why these enablers exist. Why are they doing what they do? And also, how do you actually deal with them? Like, what do you do with these enablers? I also wanted to start by sharing with you some statements that I've heard from these enablers before, just over the, past 10, 20 years. In addition to what I just said, oh, she's just being authentic, she's just being who she is, there are more. You were told maybe, oh, you're too sensitive, or maybe you really need to explain that again. I don't think she really understand that misunderstanding. Oh, I think he's just a little stupid. I think you just need to explain it again. Oh, I don't think they're bad people at all. I think they're just under a lot of pressure. Just give it a bit more time or give them a second chance. I'm sure you have heard them before. And if you feel confused, guess what? It's because they're distorting your reality. They're delaying your exit. They're making you feel lonely. Just because they're not actually doing the harm, they're not the people who yelled at you, belittle you, or manipulate you, or gaslighting you. They're still doing harm. They're still hurting you. So I also wanted to credit Dr. Ramani for educating everyone on her platform about narcissistic relationships, abuse, and the reality of enablers. So if you wanted to understand a bit more, go check her out. And I wanted to just start by talking about why enablers act this way. Because sometimes I think it confused me before. It's like, why? Why are you guys doing this? And I think one of the biggest driver is that they're fear conflict, they fear abandonment, they fear becoming the next target. Because here's the thing, they know the harm that toxic people can do. They know that once they stand up for themselves and actually speak the truth, they're going to be the next target. So they decided to stay small. They decided to just take the orders and just do it. They decided not to question it. Because if they feel like, if I don't challenge them, I stay safe. And that becomes their reality. And another thing is that they tend to have low self-worth. Their whole entire identity is tied to relationships with people. And their self-esteem really believes that being chosen or being needed means that they're worthwhile, that they're valued. So to them, it's that if I keep them happy, I matter. In addition to that, they need to belong. They need to belong in any kind of groups. I remember I worked with this girl a while back, and she worked for this very toxic boss. And, both of us actually worked for this very toxic boss. I decided to call quit and I wanted to distance myself. And actually, I removed all contact with the boss. And when she found out, she actually asked me, "Oh my God, you're one of those girls who cut contact with the exes, right?" And she said it in a way that made me feel really confused and uncomfortable. But I still said to her with confidence, yes, because why would I not? To me, I'm not married to this person. There is no contract. Why do I have to stay contact with him? No one told me that I had to do that. I'm not going to do that. Of course, I'm going to cut contact. I don't believe him. I don't really believe his opinion. I don't believe the advice from him. I certainly don't really need any network or any connection through him. To me, it was a very, very simple decision. And what I've also noticed that a lot of these enablers, because they need to belong, they don't cut contact with any of the exes. And here's the thing, she's a great person and she's okay to operate that way. And I just thought it was really interesting to bring it up because, yeah, for them to stay connected, it means that they matter. They matter. And I think it's really important to talk about how a lot of enablers, they don't actually start that way. It's through many different actions that they slowly normalize the behavior. It's because the system reward them for loyalty, and they're slowly conditioned to see dysfunction as normal. So in their head, that they think, oh, this is just how things are. This is just how corporate works. This is just how a job is. This is just how men are. This is how boys act. So they're slowly conditioning themselves because they are in that environment for so long. As mentioned, because they're in that environment for so long, for them to actually acknowledge your reality as a survivor from the toxic relationship, they actually have to confront themselves. They have to say, oh, wow, I stayed way too long, or I actually allowed this horrible things to happen, or I'm actually causing harm as well. Instead of saying that and be very honest with themselves, they decided to minimize, they rationalize these dysfunctional behaviors, and they reframe. And I want to quickly talk about, what do you do then? How do you deal with the enablers? Number one, stop seeking validation from them. You cannot get any kind of clarity and validation from people who want to misunderstand you. Again, their reality is very distorted, so they cannot see your side at all. They cannot validate you and gives you what you need at this point. So stop seeking validation, period. Another thing is that I think it really helps for us to just recognize that the role they play in the system. So actually, I think labeling them as the enablers really help us to just kind of be able to draw that distance from them. And speaking of distance, you got to set boundaries, not just with the narcissist or with the toxic person, but you got to set boundaries with the enablers. You got to limit what you share. You got to limit the access, and you have to stop explaining your experience, your reasoning, and just, reduce the exposure. You can actually mute their stories, mute their posts, or actually mute your posts so that they don't actually have all that access to you. And it's incredibly important. Another thing is that please don't try to wake them up or persuade them or try to be the hero who pulled them out of that situation, because truthfully, they are not ready. They are also benefiting from that, toxic relationship. I know it's really hard to understand, but they are benefiting from that relationship, and they don't want to be challenged. It's not ready. The only way for them to get out of that is for them to become the target, the survivor next. But that's really up to them, and it's not up to you. And I wanted to reemphasize that just because they are not the ones who are, directly doing harm to you, they're still doing harm. Confusion, making you feel isolated, making you feel too cold or too crazy, those are harm as well. And last but not least, you need to have safe friends. You need to have new friends. I never thought I would have new friends at the age of 43. Last year, I went through a whole year of resetting relationship and setting boundaries with just narcissists, toxic people, and also with enablers. It's a really, really lonely process because you're basically kind of clearing out a lot of the relationship you had. Especially for me, it was like the physical relationship that I have. But because of that, I was able to make space with the relationship that I need in other places. And for me, I built many amazing relationship online. And I know it's so funny to say that, like, oh, I have a lot of online friends, but I do, and they're incredible. I get to be who I am. They're supportive. They know who I am, and I just get to be authentic, and that's it. And the reason why this is so important is because we developed our sense of self-trust through time, through a lot of consistent behaviors. Being in an authentic relationship, be ourselves. We don't have to negotiate with ourselves or confuse ourselves, and then throughout consistent habit and throughout time, we get to build the self-trust. So I would say a lot of times when we're trying to get out of the toxic relationship, or we just got out of toxic relationship, we're not in a very stable ground because we've been confused for a very long time. So you need that safe space. You need safe friends who help you to develop that new behavior, to rewire yourself. So go out, make true friends. It's never too late. I tell you from my own experience, it's never, never too late. And I just wanted to say that if you're my friend online, I love you. Thank you so much for supporting me. And make sure to give this episode a like, review, and some 5 stars. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.